Welcome to the deep dive. If you've ever planned a trip, especially somewhere amazing like Maui, figuring out car rental costs can be, well, a bit of a puzzle.
Definitely. It fluctuates so much.
So today, we're really digging into some recent data on Maui car rentals. We want to understand what's happening with prices right now, how that stacks up historically, and hopefully give you some useful insights.
Exactly. We're looking at a report from March 3rd, 2025, plus some longer-term trend analysis. It gives us a
Yes,
pretty
sir.
good picture.
And the first thing that really caught my eye, honestly, was this nugget. For that week, March 3rd, the cheapest one-week rental at Kahului Airport OGG was just $315.
Yeah, and the key thing there is that price was down 36%.
36% just from the week before.
Just from the prior week. Yeah, a really significant drop. It suggests, maybe a bit of an oversupply or perhaps demand just fell off after the holidays.
Interesting. So maybe something for travelers to kind of keep in mind for similar times a year.
Could be. And it wasn't just like the absolute cheapest cars either. We saw prices fall across pretty much all the vehicle types we looked at.
Okay, so like your standard cars, SUVs.
Yep, economy, midsize, SUVs, even the Jeeps and convertibles, minivans too. Everything was down.
All right, let's get into those specifics for that week, March 3rd. What were the actual rock bottom prices you saw at OGG?
Okay, so that $315 economy car, that was from Dollar. If you needed a bit more room, a midsize, also Dollar, was going for $380.
Still pretty reasonable for Maui, historically speaking.
Relatively, yes. Then for, maybe hitting some different terrain, a Jeep from Thrifty was listed at $539. And if you wanted that top-down experience, a convertible from 6T was $853.
Okay, $853, starting to climb there, but still down, you said.
Still down, yeah. About 20% down for both the Jeep and the convertible that week.
Wow. Okay, what about for families or bigger groups needing more space?
Good question. So a standard SUV, this was from Thrifty, was $392. And that one was down, get this, 51%.
51. Cut in half, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. Huge drop. Then a larger, seven-seat SUV, also Thrifty, it was $568. And for maximum people moving, a minivan from budget was $624.
It's just striking how everything dropped, and some by so much. That 51%, that really shows how volatile things can get, doesn't it?
It really does. And, what's also kind of interesting is for the Jeeps and convertibles specifically, that was actually the third week in a row that prices had fallen.
3 weeks straight for those.
Hmm.
Any idea why those specifically? Maybe just less demand for the fun cars after peak season?
That'd be my guess, yeah. The sort of leisure-focused demand softening up a bit.
Makes sense. Okay, so zooming out a little, we're seeing these pretty dramatic dips right now. Is this just a temporary thing, or does the history tell us if this is sort of normal for this time of year in Maui?
That's the million-dollar question, right? So our analysis does look back 5 years. And yeah, there are definite seasonal patterns. You always see a big peak around Christmas and New Year's. Makes sense. Lots of travel.
The holiday rush.
Right. But interestingly, there's also this secondary peak. Smaller, but still noticeable, usually around mid-February.
Mid-February, like
Yeah.
Valentine's Day, President's Day weekend, maybe?
Exactly. Seems to be a popular little getaway window. It's typically not as high as Christmas, but definitely higher than, say, the fall shoulder season.
Okay, so we just passed that mid-February bump. Now, looking ahead into March, what does history usually suggest? Another bump for spring break.
Historically, yeah, you might expect a little bit of an upward tick in March. Spring break travel, sometimes Easter falls in there, boosting demand.
But the immediate forecast you saw for March 2025,
Yeah.
that seemed to be going the other way.
That's the interesting part. At the time the report was done, looking at the booking systems for the next 5 weeks in March, they were actually showing week-over-week price decline.
Declines. So going against that potential spring break bump.
Well, it seems to align with the 5-year average trend, actually. Even with potential holiday bumps, the overall trend after that February peak seems to be downwards as we head deeper into spring.
Huh. So those peaks are maybe just temporary interruptions in a broader downward slope for spring.
It kind of looks that way, yeah. The report had some charts, figures 2 and 3, I think, that visualize this quite well. You see the historical ups and downs, and then the forecast overlay.
Got it. Visuals always help with this stuff. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Booking strategies. That age-old question, book way ahead or wait for a last-minute deal. What's the usual play for Maui rentals and what's happening right now?
Right. So fundamentally, the difference between last-minute prices and advanced booking prices is basically a barometer for supply and demand.
Okay, explain that a bit more.
Well, think of it like this. If cars are scarce and lots of people want them right before they travel, Those last-minute prices shoot up. High demand, low supply.
Right.
But if there are plenty of cars sitting on the lot and fewer renters showing up, companies might drop the price last minute to get them rented. Lower demand, higher supply.
Makes sense. So which way does that barometer usually point in Maui historically?
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. Based on that 5-year data we mentioned, last-minute prices in Maui have actually been lower than advance booking prices almost 90% of the time.
90%. So waiting is usually better? That kind of goes against conventional wisdom, doesn't it?
It really does. Most people assume booking early locks in the best rate. But the data for Maui, historically, suggests waiting often paid off. That's a pretty key finding for planning.
But you said historically, the report mentioned a recent twist, didn't it? Something changed leading up to late February this year.
That's right, a key observation. For several weeks just before late Feb 2025, that pattern completely flipped. Last-minute prices were actually higher than booking ahead.
Higher. Wow. So that mid-February demand we talked about really pushed prices up even close to the travel date.
Exactly. It likely reflected that strong holiday demand. Rental companies knew people needed cars and were willing to pay more, even last minute.
So where were things as of that first week of March? Did it flip back?
It did, yes. As of March 3rd, the data showed we were back to the more typical pattern. Last-minute prices had dropped below the advance reservation rates again.
Okay, so the pressure was off a bit.
Seems like it. Post-holiday demand softening, companies adjusting prices back down.
And if you did wait until the last minute that week, were the savings noticeable?
Oh, yeah. The report broke it down. Booking last minute was about $67 a week cheaper than booking just 1 week prior.
Okay, $67, not bad.
But compare that to booking 5 weeks out. The last-minute price was $256 a week cheaper.
Whoa, $256. That's a serious chunk of change.
Absolutely. Significant savings potential there, at least for that particular week. And there's another chart, figure 4, that shows these historical crossover points visually.
Good to know. Okay, another potential money saver people talk about. Renting off airport versus right at the airport terminal. What's the usual deal there?
Generally, yeah, the common wisdom is that off-airport locations are cheaper.
Why is that usually?
Mostly comes down to lower operating costs for them. They don't pay the same high airport fees and taxes. Plus, maybe less of a convenience premium built into the price. You usually take a shuttle but save some cash.
Right, the trade-off. But similar to the booking timing, sounds like this hasn't always held true recently either.
Exactly. We saw some disruptions here, too. For a period, surprisingly strong demand, maybe combined with limited car supply at some off-airport spots, actually flipped it. Off-airport was sometimes more expensive.
Really? Okay, so what was the situation as of March 3rd? Are off-airport spots back to being consistently cheaper?
It was actually kind of a mixed bag that week, according to the report. A bit of a fluctuating pattern still.
Sometimes cheaper, sometimes not.
Pretty much. For some car types, off-airport was lower. For others, it was still higher than picking up right at OGG. It really depended on the specific vehicle category.
And I think you mentioned availability was sometimes an issue off-airport too.
Yes, that's a key point. Specifically, for that week, convertibles and the 7-seat SUVs weren't available at all from the off-airport locations tracked.
Ah, okay, so if you need one of those, you might be stuck with the airport anyway. Limited supply can definitely impact price.
For sure. Figure 6 in the source actually compares the on and off airport prices category by category. Useful visual there.
Good reference. Okay, let's broaden the view again. For listeners maybe planning a Hawaii trip, maybe island hopping, how do Maui's car rental costs right now compare to the other big islands?
Yeah, very practical question. The report looked at this for that same week starting March 3rd, 1-week rentals across the 5 main airports.
Okay, what did it find?
So Honolulu H&L was the cheapest at $298 for the week. Kauai LAH was close behind at $280, actually, slightly cheaper.
Okay, so Maui wasn't the cheapest then.
No, Maui OGG was $315. Then you had Kona on the Big Island, KOA, at $341. And Halo, also a Big Island, ITO, was the highest that week at $356.
Interesting range. So Kauai was cheapest, Hilo most expensive. Where does that leave Maui overall? Sounds like it's kind of in the middle, maybe.
Exactly. After maybe being on the higher end previously, Maui's $315 price tag put it pretty much right in line with the others.
So the takeaway is,
yeah,
don't necessarily expect Maui to be way more expensive for a car right now.
pretty much. The difference between the cheapest Kauai and the most expensive Hilo was only about $76 for the week. And all 5 were within roughly a $50 range of Maui itself. So, yeah, fairly comparable right now.
That's really good context.
Yeah.
Now, this has all been super specific, which is great. Can you just briefly touch on where this data actually comes from? How is it collected?
Sure. So the report explains they track the lowest advertised prices they can find each week for a 1-week rental, starting from Kahului Airport, OGG.
Okay.
And they do this across those 7 different car categories. We talked about economy, midsize, SUV, etc. They check multiple companies to find that bottom price for each category.
Got it. And the historical stuff?
That comes from a longer term, like 5-year tracking study they did, focusing specifically on economy cars to really understand those seasonal ups and downs. There's also a blog post mentioned, when is the best time to rent a car in Maui, that apparently has more detail on those findings.
Okay, great. So if you, the listener, want to check this out yourself, maybe see current rates for your dates, where should you look?
The report points to a couple of places. Their website has a cars and rates section, and they also mention a specific booking site,
Right.
rentals.mauicarental.biz.
Rentals.mauicarental.biz.
Got it. Yeah, and that site apparently pulls together rates from a whole bunch of companies: Ace, Alamo, Avis, Budget Dollar, Enterprise, Payless, Thrifty.
So comparison shopping made easy.
Seems like it. And it covers airport locations, plus spots in Kahului Town, and even down in the resort areas like Kihewelea and Kanapali. And importantly, they highlight there's no cancellation penalty.
Oh, that's huge. Flexibility is key when planning.
Absolutely. Plans change.
Okay, fantastic. So let's try and wrap this all up. What are the main headline takeaways listeners should remember from this deep dive?
I'd say there are maybe 3 key things. 1, Maui car rental prices have dropped quite a bit from recent highs.
Okay, prices are down.
2, they seem to be trending downwards, at least in the short-term forecast. And related to that, watching for last-minute deals might actually save you money right now, which is historically typical for Maui, but wasn't true just a few weeks ago.
Right, that last-minute opportunity is back.
And 3, the cost of renting in Maui is currently pretty much on par with the other major Hawaiian islands. It's not standing out as significantly more expensive at the moment.
Perfect summary.
Yeah.
So bottom line, if you're heading to Maui soon, keep an eye on those rates. Maybe don't book too far in advance right now, and know that the cost should be fairly comparable to other islands.
That nails it, yeah.
All right. And to leave you with something to think about, considering these trends, the historical patterns, the recent volatility, how might, unexpected things, maybe flight changes, maybe a sudden shift in travel advice, how might that impact these prices going forward? And what steps could you take as a traveler to try and snag the best possible rate for your own trip? Definitely some food for thought there. Thanks for diving deep with us today.